But Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course.
Oh my gosh.
And he ended up going to prison and serving his time.
Is he crying?
Yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career. And
after all that this man has done, he's sitting here crying like a baby, trying to get us to feel empathy for him instead of taking accountability for all the people that he allegedly hurt. Oh my gosh, bro. That I don't believe that. Hey everyone, Just Be here, and I wanted to do a quick breakdown of this interview that Dan Schneider put out in response to the Quiet on Set documentary that just released on Investigation Discovery, talking about former Nickelodeon child stars who suffered at the hands of abuse by Dan and also various people around him at the time on a lot of our favorite shows such as All That, Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show, and so many others. It's making the rounds right now. He just dropped this yesterday in response to the 4 episodes of the documentary series that came out, and I couldn't believe the fact that some of the things that he said. Guys, just know that I will have to stop the video throughout it in order to make commentary because you can't just replay someone else's video on YouTube. So please bear with me as we do this reaction.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon's iCarly.
Bro gets T-Bo from iCarly. When is the last time anyone has seen this guy, by the way? I'm just saying. Check the IMDb page.
Chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss.
He reached out.
I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
I'm really glad you're here because I believe this is important, for sure. We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss, is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
That's it. First off, Dan doesn't even, he tries to make it seem as if it's Boogie who reached out to him and not necessarily the other way around to try to get a hold of the crisis. So basically crisis management. What credibility are you trying to establish with the general public if you don't even go and reach out to a credible journalist who can sit down and interview you and really hit you with the hard questions that aren't going to be filtered in advance, that you more than likely put up and got one of your former employees or your former workers, somebody who actually likes you, to come on and interview you? I mean, that's already strike one against you, Dan, like honestly.
Talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation.
Dan, talk to me about the writer's room. From what I saw, not cool.
No. And I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever. Period. The end. No excuses. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me. I remember very clearly my early experiences, my first experiences in the entertainment business. I was green, I was scared, I was excited. It meant the world to me that I was getting those opportunities.
So
and I went in and I got lucky because they were great. My first couple of experiences were fantastic. And the fact that I didn't pay that forward to every employee that walked through my door, it hurts my heart because I should have. And I wish I could go back and fix that. In the writer's room, I said things that went too far or made practical jokes that went too far. And that was wrong. And that was because, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature. Wouldn't happen today. But I'm just really sorry it happened.
Yeah, but the problem is, Dan, why are you now saying this today after the actual documentary? This is something that you would have had time to reflect on. I'm sure this isn't the first time this has been brought up to you, because I watched the documentary as well, and it seemed as if people would have been afraid to even hold you accountable. So even when you were out of a place of proverbial power now, why is it that you're just now coming to this place and watching this interview with the rest of the world, and now you want to give this apology on screen and pick up the phone and call them? Like, do you even pick up the phone and call the people that you've heard, the people in the writer's room, the former actors, like former set workers and all that stuff? Like, come on.
Now, we know you've had a lot of success. Over 2 decades, thousands of people have worked with you, for you. Let's speak directly to the people who did not have a good experience with you.
Okay, I would like to speak to those people because I hate anybody who worked for me and didn't have a good time. You know me. You've been on my sets. Look, I've had some employees that have worked for me for 10 years, some more than 20 years, who would work with me again, but not everybody. There's still a significant number that didn't have a great time working for me. So my batting average isn't nearly high enough in that area. And the way they wouldn't get the best of me is that I would let the pressure of doing 40 or even more episodes per year, I would let that pressure get to me, which a good boss should never, ever do. I would snap at people sometimes. I would be snarky when I could have given them a nicer answer. I would not give people the time that they needed. I would be in too big a hurry to get on to the next thing I had to do. And watching that show, it made me, there were so many times I wanted to pick up a phone and call some of those people and say, I'm so sorry, and let's talk about it. And I wish you had a better time, and I wish I could have shown you a better experience. Yeah.
But again, this isn't the first time that you would have been hearing this feedback from those people, or even people who knew them, or people who were around you that also would have had the same experience. It isn't the first time.
You've written hundreds of episodes. Thousands of jokes have been told.
Yeah.
Listen to this guy. He's like, he still thinks Dan can give him a job at some point. Like, this is Dan's boy. You can see that. Wow. The first thing he does is, he says when he watched the interview, he picked up the phone and he called Dan, checking on him, and then seeing if he could actually sit down and do an interview with him. So automatically, you're probably not working. And so you want to now go ahead and have an opportunity to capitalize on this whole thing to get your name in headlines so that you can say, I interviewed Dan. I wonder if you realize that both of you then lose credibility, because all it is a friend talking to another friend who both of them like each other. But there's no third party who's there that's impartial and unbiased to actually go ahead and critique Dan and hold him accountable and hold his feet to the fire and ask him the hard-hitting questions. That's not what's happening here. And so Boogie, Tebow, wasn't that the juice guy on iCarly? Like, bro, come on. That's an L right there. I can tell you that Dan was the one that called them to try to say, listen, bro, I need your help right now. I need to get some points with not just the world, but the black community, because they said some things about Dan's alleged racist behavior as well on set. And so who was the prime, target to go ahead and host this for me? So,
but currently where we are, some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
All these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay. Now,
really, kids getting jizzed on thought that was funny. Spraying goo that looks like a you-know-what shot on kids' faces. Kids thought that was funny at the time. Even when I used to watch these shows back then, I didn't find that was funny. I knew exactly what that was. I thought it was sick.
Looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like it. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am. Yeah. So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
Hold on real quickly. You guys want to see something crazy? Over 99% of you guys that watch my content are not subscribed. So I'm asking real quickly, if you don't mind, just hit the like button and hit subscribe real quickly. I'd love to keep on giving this content to you guys, and lets me know that people actually are interested. Feel free to do that, man. Really appreciate it a lot. Would help me out a long way in growing my small channel. Thanks. Now back to the video. Because in the documentary, they said that basically if you didn't agree with Dan, like, you were in trouble. So there was no opportunity for them to speak up in the writer's room and say, hey, we don't think this is funny. We don't think this is appropriate. Can we cut this out? Else they would lose their jobs. So now you want to come back 20 years later and say, oh, they could have spoken up, and I would actually cut it out. They didn't thought it was funny. Right, buddy.
The thought process from the series is you had the power to just write a joke, and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
The notion that I had the power to just produce whatever I wanted and have it air is completely false.
Okay.
There were many, many levels of scrutiny.
I want you guys to pay attention to this line. I'm going to show you something real quickly.
Okay. We had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So 2 coasts.
2 coasts of approval. Yes. And by the way, approval at every stage, really. And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
Now, when you say approval, these obviously that's a hierarchy, not your colleagues, people in the room. Okay.
No, not my colleagues. No, these are my bosses. Bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses. And they're approving all of this. Okay. And we're also shooting it in front of all sorts of adults and caregivers and the set teacher and the families. Everybody's watching it. And if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that, that's not appropriate, it would have been cut out.
Now,
okay. Now, there was a gentleman who was in the documentary who said that he spoke up about it at one point, and he was dismissed pretty much on the spot, right? I can't remember his name. He was a bald-headed guy. He was on the documentary. Now, this line that Dan also uses and says that, oh, we had people on both coasts, East and West, and I had superiors who would approve every script and they made notes and all those kind of things before we could even go ahead with them. Here is where I know this whole thing that Dan has right here was choreographed and engineered. At the ending part of the final episode of the documentary, they have a quote where they got it directly from Dan prior to this interview where he says, everything that happened on the shows I ran was carefully scrutinized by dozens of involved adults. All stories, dialogue, costumes, and makeup were fully approved by network executives on 2 coasts. A standards and practices group read and ultimately approved every script, and programming executives reviewed and approved all episodes. In addition, every day on set, there were always parents and caregivers and their friends watching us rehearse and film. So he basically repeats the same thing his PR team on this interview that he would have also given to the producers of the documentary. But then Nickelodeon, who was also asked for comment, goes on to say this as well. In response to producers' questions, Nickelodeon has stated that it investigates all formal complaints as part of our commitment to fostering a safe and professional workplace. We have adopted numerous safeguards over the years to help ensure that we are living up to our own high standards and the expectations of our audience. Now, you guys let me know if that doesn't seem like some sort of textbook PR response that both Dan and Nickelodeon more than likely, allegedly, collaborated on to put out their response to this, which means that they more than likely are still supporting him in some ways.
I'm gonna push back a little bit because the series painted you in this way that you were just the guy that was doing what he wanted, and people were afraid to confront you about things. So just humor me, say that was the case. What would have been the ultimate way to...
Okay, if nobody on the set, if all of the dozens and dozens of adults that were on the set, if they didn't say anything, if my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice.
No, because at that stage in the game, Nickelodeon already had trusted Dan so much. He's their star child. He's producing hit after hit after hit. And at this stage, they're like, we can trust this guy, leave him alone to his own devices. He's running things over there on those shows. We don't want to get involved where we don't need to. So as far as all of the production crew is concerned, they're looking at you at the top and it's like, who's above this guy except the studio? And if we go directly to the studio, we're hopping over our boss to report anything, so we might lose our jobs. So at this stage, everyone around him is afraid to even speak up. He's trying to make it seem as if not. And I had bosses, but no, you were the guy. They wouldn't get they wouldn't interfere. You were the guy. They only interfered a few years ago where they allegedly let you go and parted ways with you. They were no longer in a position where they were fully dependent on the shows that you were putting out because essentially your time had passed in terms of making hits. And so it was a less risky move to keep you there.
It kind of hit close to home. Mm-hmm. Being a new father, I wouldn't be opposed to my child being in the entertainment industry. It doesn't matter what age. Yeah. Seeing some of those on-air dares, seeing it now from where you are now in your life, what do you think of that?
I think that some of the on-air dares went too far. I think they pushed the envelope too far. Not all of them, not most of them, but some did. Nickelodeon wanted to do their version of Fear Factor. At the time we were shooting All That, so I was tasked with doing these on-air dares with the All That cast. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of Fear Factor, and we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we would come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay.
Right.
He said that he says he couldn't put the kids in dangerous situations. What do you call taking a scorpion and putting it inside a teenager's mouth and forcing them to eat it? What do you call having worms, dirty worms, sit all over kids' bodies for laughs and kicks and giggles? What do you call covering children in peanut butter and having dogs lick them?
Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that aired. At the time, I had no indication that any kid ever had a problem with them. But when I was watching the show over the past 2 nights, I now know that there were kids who did have problems with the on-air dare. Really? And it breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare or anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it. Yeah. Period. The end. Right. And if I had known at the time, I would have changed it on the spot.
But he knew, because you also had people's parents of these same actors were speaking up and inquiring and giving their feedback. There was a black kid who got fired from all that, basically because his mom started speaking up. So what do you mean? They brought these things to your attention, you just didn't like it.
They also highlighted 2 black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah. I can talk about my experience, how my experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey. I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Yes, and the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it. I'm very proud of that. It's very important to me. And not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my show.
What's interesting is that he's saying he doesn't want to speak to any one specific journey and experience, but literally this whole response video is a reaction to everyone's experiences and stories. Make it make sense.
Well, something that really kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates, they came to you. Versus how they made you look. With that said,
that's not what they said. They did not say that they came to that. That is absolutely what none of the cast said. Dan was not the person you could talk to. So that is utter trash, bro. Tebow, get out of here, bro.
One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. Phone rang. I answered. It was Amanda. She was upset. She was in distress. She had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety. I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up. Then I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you.
Regardless of what some people might think, regardless of all the people who were victim to this guy's alleged behavior and alleged abuse, I still think it's positive that you were there for people when they needed you. The 10% of the time that he might have been there for them versus the 90% of the other times where he was allegedly atrocious to them. Gotcha.
And let's talk about some of the things that have just been swirling forever.
Okay.
You were banned from your set.
Never happened. That is a false rumor.
What happened?
Add it to the list of false rumors.
Talk to me. What happened?
They were adult actresses at the time, and they had their own specific reasons for not wanting to do the show anymore. I'm not judging that. It got tense, and what they don't know, maybe, is I did everything I could to make that show go away.
So I think he's talking here about the Victorious and iCarly spinoff Sam and Cat, which starred Ariana Grande and Jeanette McCurdy. So I wasn't watching the show at this time, but apparently it just kind of, production stopped randomly on it, and it was in some sort of weird limbo after that. And if you really and truly brought that show to a natural end, instead of the network just canceling it or something like that because of some other reason, then it would have had a proper tie-off. But from everything I've seen, the show just stopped, and it was just incomplete. So if you weren't fired, as you're saying you weren't, why the network do that?
Yeah, maybe some people thought I got banned.
So it was more of an assumption because this guy's usually here and now he's not.
I don't know if it was an assumption. I don't know if somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set.
But why would they not want you on the set anymore? You being the showrunner, you've done this for iCarly and Drake and Josh and all that, and the Amanda Show, and the list goes on. And all of a sudden, you're on as a showrunner. You're there every day. And now this one particular show, the main actresses now start to kick up, and now they're having an issue. You won't see what the issue is. You're just saying, oh, they're having an issue, and it's best for me to pull away and not be there. Doesn't it mean you're the reason they don't want to be there, Dan? And see, he thinks he's slick here by not going deeper into detail and giving more context. But if you're perceptive enough, you can pick out exactly what happened, why it is Ariana and Jeanette wanted out. And it's crazy because even when Jeanette McCurdy put out her book, she doesn't name him, but she depicts a strong enough caricature of Dan without saying Dan's name in the book so that she doesn't get sued.
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night. And next, I heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck.
Yeah.
A lot of them pretty famous.
A lot of them famous, yeah.
Of course, Drake was devastated that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was and asking for leniency. And they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree, and they still did this. That's baffling. that adults would do that.
Yeah.
Okay, but they're still doing it today. Think about the people who still support Dan to this day, like Tebow here, and other people from the cast of Victorious and iCarly, right, who still to this day support Dan. It's the same sort of situation back then with Brian Peck, where you had a list of people like James Marsden and other famous actors, right, who would have written in letters in support of him back then, knowing that, yeah, he did some of the stuff, but please, you know, he had to have been tempted and something would have went wrong. But it's the same thing here, where you can still have people who are so mesmerized by the image and representation of you, but fooled by who you actually are. And they will go to the ends of the world to defend you because really and truly they feel some sort of deeper relationship and connection to you, but they're overlooking your real nature and the truth and the facts about who you really are and what you've done to people. So there's a direct correlation between how people supported Brian Peck back then and how people are supporting Dan now. And speaking of support, you see the same 4,100 likes on this video that Dan posted? Shame on everybody that liked on that video. Shame. That's 4,000 people who were saying, I believe that, over the dozens of people who suffered at his hands.
I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge?
Oh, boy.
I said, of course.
Here we go.
And
Waterworks.
going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career. And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show. I don't understand that.
Yeah, no, but let's keep it on you, Dan. Let's not deflect and I'll start going off into the nice try. He wants to deflect and I'll hey, why did Brian get away when Disney hired him? No, let's keep it on you, buddy. No, none of that stuff.
I don't understand.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, man. Are you okay? You want to take a minute?
No, lie.
Okay, you want to take a minute? What's this Bart kissing ninja? What?
Okay. I think we really unpacked some important things. We set the record straight on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Before I let you get out of here, I appreciate the vulnerability that you use in knowing that there's definitely things that you would have and should have done differently. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Anything that if you could go back and navigate the journey differently, what would that look like?
Yeah, there's definitely things that I would do differently. One that I think would be really, really important is when you're hiring young actors, minors, to work in television, I would suggest that we have a licensed therapist there to oversee that process for the specific reason of making sure that those kids really wanted to do this job, that they really wanted to be on television. Maybe they should even be informed about what that means. What's it going to mean if you're famous? What's that going to mean on social media? What's it going to mean within your family? Let them find out. And then that way, if a kid doesn't want to be on a TV show, they can opt out. Yeah. That psychologist, that therapist could come to us and say, this kid doesn't want to do it, or their parents aren't understanding of what's going to come. And then we could avoid the mistake of ever putting a kid in a TV show that didn't want to be there. And additionally, the main thing that I would change is how I treat people and everyone. I definitely at times didn't give people the best of me. I didn't show enough patience. I could be cocky and definitely overambitious and sometimes just straight up rude and obnoxious. And I am so sorry that I ever was. And when I watched the show, I could see the hurt in some people's eyes and it made me feel awful and regretful and sorry.
The hurt in some people's eyes. You allegedly forcing people to submit to your fetishes and fantasies on kids at the time. On kids' shows. I don't even want to go into detail about some of the stuff, man, just because YouTube is funny. But, like, instead of making some sort of apology video to the entire world, you should be making phone calls individually, letters and emails and text messages to all of the people from this documentary who said that they were hurt by you, who said that they were victimized by you. And so, for me, as someone who grew up watching and as a fan of most of all of the things that he would have produced, this is very, very disappointing to see his response to this. It's in very bad taste. I simply cannot believe everything that I'm hearing right now. It is absolutely insane that this man is responding in this way. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section about this entire situation, because he disabled the comments on his video and he disabled the comments on all of his social media. So basically, He doesn't want to hear from you. He just kind of put it out there and that's it. He doesn't want feedback. He doesn't want to know what's happening. He just wants to try to clear his name. What a coward. Anyways, guys, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, peace.